Okay, Silk Road people, this is the next most requested-ish build from me, which is that of the Sorc. I'm going to warn you all now, I do not play Sorcs outside of the very much hated heavy attack build, so I'm going to give you a rundown as best I can with my knowledge of the class and the skill lines, and kind of just give you an idea of a rough overview of something that'll at least get you maybe 70-80k DPS if you're very lucky. But bearing in mind, heavy attack builds still hit 80k and are still very viable in some groups for running your veteran content with. So as you can see here, I'm running the Oaken Soul Ring. It's giving me all of my major and minor buffs that I need, so I don't really need it. I run that alongside the Sergeant's setup, so one piece heavy, because that is giving me additional damage and it's buffing all of my heavy attacks, and then I buff that alongside Order's Wrath, crit damage and crit healing. Yes, this is a crafted set. Yes, there are some other sets out there that other people will probably say to you, oh, that's better to run than, Order's Wrath. Order's Wrath for me is personally the best option. As you can also see, because I'm running a mythic, I run one piece Slime Craw, giving me that additional crit chance, and it is the lightning staff of the Sergeant with a shock damage enchant, although I probably will change that to fire eventually, and an infused trait. So other options for gear before we look at the skills of the heavy attack build. The main two are obviously dungeons. First one is coming out of where is it? Blessed Crucible, there we go. And it is Noble Duelist. Now this again is increasing your heavy attack damage against all monsters for 15 seconds. So it's quite a nice set to have. The second set obviously is the one that everybody was running when heavy attacks were still a big thing, and that is Storm Masters. Again, it's heavy attacks. It's all buffing your heavy attacks. This setup is insanely easy because you don't run any trial set on it. So as you can see, very easy to parse. Heavy attack, skill, heavy attack, pet, heavy attack, prey, lightning storm, and so on and so forth. This build at the same time is built to run in trials as an interrupt DD, specifically for that of Veteran Asylum Sanctorum +2. So yes, I still insist on bringing a heavy attack build to trials as a DD. I still really enjoy it. So if we have a quick look at my CP setup for this, you'll see I have Fighting Finesse, which is my crit damage and crit healing. Spirit, which is again buffing my light and heavy attacks. Deadly Aim, which is my single target damage, and Wrathful Strikes, which is increasing my weapon and spell damage. So again, it's about buffing, buffing, buffing with this build. When we look at the other skill, the other CP even, I have Boundless Vitality for my max health, Fortified for my max armor, Spirit Mastery because you never know when you're going to need a res, and Bastion because if I'm not running Crushing Shock, I will have a shield skill on me to help there. And when I don't run Spirit Mastery, obviously it goes in for Rejuvenation to give that extra health and stam and mag recovery. Even though I am a heavy attack Sorc, it's still helpful to have that additional recovery. So, skill setup is insanely easy. High Elf, make sure you have all the passives. As ever, make sure you have medicinal use, and make sure you have the provisioning skills if you're running as a heavy attack build or even as a regular 2-bar build on the Sorc. You want to make sure you have these two specifically unlocked, right? So we're going to go back up all the way to the top. Crystal Weapon is a nice buff if you've not got it in the group. Again, it does buff your light and heavy attacks, but it's just one to have that if you're the only Sorc in the group of a group and you're running and your raid lead is like, okay, well we need some extra, damage. Crystal weapon is one to have, but you don't need it all the time. It's not a necessity. The main necessities are the summon charged Atronach. This is because it gives an AoE and it gives concussion status effect. This is the off balance that's going to be proccing Exploiter for other DDs in your group. Summon Volatile Familiar is a nice little damage dealer. Daedric Prey is buffing your Volatile Familiar, and it gives a nice little bomb at the end for the little explosions. Twilight Matriarch is your main heal on this build, because this build is built to do solo content like Vatashran and Maelstrom Arena. It's also ideal for soloing world bosses and soloing some of the base game and DLC dungeons. With this build specifically, I have successfully soloed. Was it? No. Yes, Black Drake Villa. I have successfully soloed Black Drake Villa with this build, alongside some other regular dungeons and Hardened Ward if you're not needing Crushing Shock, if you're not an Interrupted D. Hardened Ward, again, it's a nice little shield. You can see the shield there on my bar. Storm Calling. Power Overload is a highly underrated ultimate. You just heavy attack and there you go. Now, this is an underrated ultimate, especially as a Sorc if you're in places like Vass. If you're in not Vass even, fucking hell. Hoth. Fucking Hoth. If you're in Hoth with the capacitators and the little bastards that have the shields up on them. If you are in Black Rose Prison, for example, with the next round, right? The power overload acts the exact same as the Arcanist's beam. You are able to use it and it will not reflect back on you. So where other DDs, Nightblade for example, cannot use Swallow Soul, the Arcanist can use their beam and you as a Sorc can use your power overload. And that will allow you to basically go straight through the shield of the ad and not have any lashback on you as the DD. Finally, we obviously have Unstable Wall of Elements. This one will explode when it ends, rather than just rather than just burning out like the blockade will, which we use on the Arcanist. This one actually gives an explosion, and the Unstable Wall of Storms gives concuss and sets enemies off balance. So again, this is giving that passive to the Exploiter, and as you can see there, off balance on my Spriggan dummy. Straight from proccing it. So that makes it quite a useful little skill to have as the Sorc. So if we swap now to a 2-bar build, I'm going to warn you all now, I do not do 2 bars. They are not something that I am very used to having, so we're going to bear with me a little bit and grin and bear for a second while I take off the Oaken Soul ring. I'm going to equip this random ring here so that I've got a 2-bar setup now. Okay, so 2-bar setup can be run multiple different ways. You can run it dual wield front bar with a destro staff, you can run dual wield front bar with a bow, or you can run dual wield two-handed. So, if we look at the primary bar, your usual skills are going to be things like Dawnbreaker into obviously Flawless, and that's always going to be your front bar ultimate when you are running a 2-bar build. Yes, believe me, I know how annoying that can be, because it's the same bloody skill all the fucking time. Trust me, I feel the pain there. Obviously, you're going to want to have all of the passives here, and as ever, we want Barbed Trap. Trap is a nice little bleed dot. For the back bar ultimate, we have options. We can have Shooting Star. Lovely little AoE damage. Always nice to have. Mage Light is one of the skills, obviously Inner Light. And it's your Major Prophecy and Major Savagery. So you get that. Jesus, pork chop. What's the matter? I know. He's not happy I'm recording a video for you guys. He's voicing his opinion here. He's voicing an opinion. You have inner light. Same thing applies here as it does with Expert Hunter. The only reason I run inner light here is I don't have Expert Hunter unlocked and morphed, and I don't particularly fancy going and getting it. Options are obviously things like Energy Orb, not Energy Orb, Mystic Orb even. Ignore the fact that I've just completely morphed that wrong. I do not have money to go and unmorph it, so let's quickly just unmorph it this way. Pork chop, I know you're upset. Come on, my dude. So we're going to put that to Mystic Orb rather than Energy Orb. Energy Orb is run by the healers. Mystic Orb is run by the DDs. This is because this is going to increase your health, mag, and stam recovery when you're in content, and it's always a nice one to have. Obviously, Mage Light to Inner Light, and Meteor into Shooting Star. Front Bard, obviously we're going to have Dawnbreaker into Flawless, and I'm going to get rid of that Oaken Soul Ring so that I can actually do things again. So again, bearing in mind, I do not run Sorcs very often. But as you can see there, we've got our orb. Okay? So if we go all the way back up, we're going to go to our front bar. So we have Crystal Shard. That is one of the main skills on the Sorc that almost every single Sorc will run. And you have two options. You can either, if you're going to be a Stam Sorc, you convert it to the Stamina ability, you run Crystal Weapon. Great. If you're going to be a Mag, or sometimes even a Stam running and they will run Mag skills, you run Crystal Frags. Now frags, it's really important, right? You don't spam your crystal frags like I'm doing here. Okay? That's really not what you want to do. Okay? You hit frags, you wait for it to turn pink, like it is just done on my screen there, and then it doesn't cost, but it casts for a lot stronger. So you don't use that as your spammable, that is your buff skill. Okay? As ever, we always run the Volatile Familiar, we always run Daedric Prey, and we always run a form of the Twilight. Now, if you're going solely for just DPS straight, you little fucking asshole. Straight damage, ignoring the fact that my other cat even has just gone and knocked over a pile of books I have sat in my living room because he wants to be a fucking dickhead right now. We would run Twilight Tormentor. This is purely for straight damage. If you're only going for damage, that's what you want. If you are going for something with a bit of a heal, still does damage, but you want the Matriarch. So for this example, we are going to run the Twilight Tormentor. Now, quick point for you all. I'm not going to put in my passives because fuck that. Right? Watch what happens. So I summon my Tormentor. It's all well and good. My Tormentor's summoned. Backbar and it dies. So, the main thing you have to remember with the Sorc is weapon swap. Always, always, always backbar your pets. Do not go into content and be like, right, I've got my pets, I'm good. Swap to your backbar and your pet's gone. Because you've not double barred it. So now when I weapon swap, my pets are always there. As ever, Jesus Christ, there's a cat running over my feet. Power Overload is another choice for the ultimate on the back bar alongside Atronachs. So, you have options for the Atronachs. You can either have the Greater Storm Atronach, which is increasing the health and the damage of the Atronach itself. Or you can have the Charged Atronach, which gives an AoE effect and will always apply concussion. Concussion leads to the off balance. So, Summon Charged Atronach is usually the favoured one that people go with. However, it is, as ever, a lot of personal choice. So we go to our front bar. You're running a dual-wield front bar, you run Blade Cloak. Again, you can either have Quick Cloak or Deadly. Deadly is usually used for parsing because it's more damage, but if you're going into content you need to be quick. The Major Expedition of the Quick Cloak is quite nice. So that's a very rough idea of a front bar setup for you guys. And back bar. Destro is usually the back bar of choice. So you can either use Elemental Blockade or Unstable Wall of Elements. For this example, I will use Unstable Wall. It's a personal preference thing again. If you are on the back bar and you are running a two-hand, however, you would run Critical Charge morphed into Stampede, and you would run Cleave morphed into I can't bloody remember. I do know that it is Cleave, and I can't remember what it morphs into, but you would run that back bard, so you would run Crit Charge instead of the Unstable Wall, and you would run Cleave instead of the Orb. You want to try and keep your inner light, though, because that is meaning you don't have to run Tri-Stat Pots for at least the back bar. Okay, so that's a very, very basic setup. For the Sorc, you would run light and medium armor passives, ignoring the heavy armor passives. Make sure you've got your soul magic abilities. If you don't want to run the inner light back bard, or if you want to run inner light but you don't want the orb, you want the extra bleed dot, run the trap. If you maybe don't want to run crystal frags because you're not comfortable with it, swap it out, put trap on, put orb back on the back bar. There are so many options for different setups. Obviously, I am a high elf. It's just what I personally prefer for my Sorc. It's a lot of personal choice here, guys. It's, that's what it is. Okay? There is obviously a lot of different options with the Sorc, including things like Mage's Wrath, which act as quite a nice execute. So you would use this front bard instead of maybe trap. And then when the enemy is less than 20% health, you would use your Mage's Wrath. Or you would run it with your Crystal Frags, so on and so forth. You guys get the idea. I don't run Sorcs. I'm not hugely comfortable with Sorcs. I'm giving you a very basic overview of what options you kind of have. Now, if we look at Pork Chop, Sheesh Cat. If we look at the options for your sets, again, it's very much similar to what everybody else is running for Arcanists and so on and so forth, depending on the type of build you're going for. So Deadly Strike, as ever, is one of the favorite sets currently. It's making its comeback. I freaking love that because when I first started being a DD properly, Deadly was one of the it sets. So goes and comes in this game, I tell you. Back bar options would be if you're running an Inferno or a Lightning Staff. Never run a fucking Ice Staff for the love of everything. You could run the Maelstrom Inferno Staff if you need to run a back bar and you're wanting to run if you're wanting to run like a two-handed, you have the Maelstrom obviously Greatsword. So it's quite a nice one there. Or if you're wanting to go old school, obviously there is the bow and you can run that Maelstrom bow. Again, quite a nice option to have. It's another option, obviously, as ever, is the Master's bow or the I don't really think. Actually, yeah, no. Master's Greatsword could work with Cleave. I think it would take a bit of testing, but you never know with things. Set wise, it's very much the same as every other build right now. It's Reliquin, it's Coral Riptide, it's Ansouls, it's Berserking Warrior if you're going to run that on your weapons and jewelry. I mean, Basai if you really don't mind like dropping your mag really low. I personally don't recommend it if you're just starting out because it can be quite difficult to sustain. Ansels is always a great option, one that not a lot of people really run anymore because it's seen as kind of worthless, but if you're just starting out, False Gods is quite an interesting option to have out there. You never know when you're going to need it. If we just look at base game dungeons, skipping straight over the DLCs, but if we just look at straight in at base game, Medusa. Medusa is one of them sets that you can run as your weapons and jewelry, and it gives you minor force at all times, and that is quite a nice, you know, option to have. Another one of my personal favorites, is that of Burning Spellweave. Again, really easy to run. You just run City of Ash 1 a couple hundred times, and you'll have a full set of Burning Spellweave. Other options would include things like, if I can find it, yep, Stormmaster. Okay, it is aimed at heavy attacks, but if you're having a heavy attack to regain some of your resources, then you go back to light attack parsing. It's quite a nice one to have. You never know when you're going to need it. And as ever, Slimecraw is just as ever an option to run if you are, wanting to run a mythic item with it. Mythics aren't always needed, but they're nice to have. You never know when it's going to be needed. Again, if we're looking at DLC, you've got Kinraz. As ever, it's light or heavy attack procs. You could have something like Pillar of Nirn, quite easy to farm. Everybody farms it at the minute. Pork chop, will you just settle, please, my dude? No, of course he won't. Nah. See, the issue is, when it comes to Sorc DDs, I don't run them, so I don't know what I'm handling here. Obviously, you've got Aegis Collar. It's a lot of the same meta setups for DDs at the minute, unless we look at crafted and base game sets, in which case you could maybe find something quite interesting. For example, I've had a few theory builds centre around Unfathomable Darkness and setting up something around that for the Sorc maybe. But if we look very finally at mythic items for the Sorc, your obvious options are, as ever, the Harpooner's Wading Kilt, but it does require you to light attack weave, so you have to be on point with doing that. Oaken Soul Ring, which you've already seen me running. I freaking love a 1-bar Sorc. I won't take it into a prog group with me, because unless the prog is specifically built to run as 1-bar Sorcs, it's not going to work very well. But it's always a nice option to have if you just want to run around and solo stuff. And as ever, Velothi's Amulet. And Velothi just means that you can't light attack very often, but you never know. And if you really want to push yourself, you really want to be a bit out there, Martial Knowledge, but it does require you to drop your stam, so if you're not quite comfortable doing that, I wouldn't recommend it. But outside of that, if you have any questions, you can reach me on the Discord or in the comments here. Traits, I just realised I didn't go over that. Obviously, all of your armour would be Divines. Your main hand weapon, if you're using dual daggers, would be Nirn-honed Precise or Nirn-honed Charged. It's a personal preference. Like I say, I like personally going with Nirn Charged. Other people say Nirn Precise. I have both setups on different builds, depending on what I need that day. Your back bar would be infused back bar with a crusher, not a crusher, bloody hell, that's a tank, with a weapon spell damage increase enchant on it. I will get there eventually today with these damn cats and my brain. Like I say, I don't run Sorcs. If you have any questions, ask. There are hundreds of thousands of videos on the internet. You never know what you'll find. But if you look at me for my 1-bar, you'll see I do use the Lover's boon, which is my Mundus Stone. I personally prefer that over the Thief for at least the Sorc. for at least on a Sorc, I prefer that over the Thief Mundus. But everybody is different and everybody will tell you something different depending on what they prefer.